Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 359, cover dated September 1998. So the cover features Rogue in her original costume going all the way back to Avengers Annual number 10 and her first appearance. And of course that costume was worn when she was part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants when it was led by Mystique, her foster mother. And she has a couple of speech balloons there. You gave it your best shot, sugar. Now it's my turn. Now, if you think about it, this is an allusion, an homage to that famous final panel at the end of Uncanny X-Men 132, featuring Wolverine in the sewers beneath the Hellfire Club mansion in New York City, where he similarly says, "You gave it your best shot. Now it's my turn." And that's intriguing, that little reference that Bachalo has worked here, because the pencils are by Bachalo, Tim Townsend inks, and Liquid on the colours. And the cover caption is "Rogue breaks out." So why is she imprisoned and shackled? Well, we'll see when we go into this issue itself. So let's open this one up to the splash page. And there are 23 pages of story and art in this issue, but there's a mixed creative team. The title of the story is Power Play, and the credits are diverse. So Joe Kelly and Steve Seagle, or Stephen T. Seagle, are credited as writers. So the two authors of the two main X titles, Uncanny X-Men and Adjectiveless X-Men, co-plotting and co-writing this particular issue. The pencil credits are Chris Bachalo. Bachalo does 6 pages of pencils in this issue, and the other 17 are by Ryan Benjamin, an artist who began as a Jim Lee clone and got his first work over at Jim Lee's Wildstorm Studios, part of Image Comics. And then the rest of the creative team down here, we've got a number of inkers: Tim Townsend, primarily inking the Bachalo pages, Scott Hanna and John Holdredge inking the Ryan Benjamin pages, and colours by Shannon Blanchard. So I haven't noted her name before. Richard Starkings and Comicraft rounds out the creative team for the digital lettering. So what's going on in this splash? Well, we've got Rogue, and we've got the back of Gambit's head there, and we've got third-person narration. The dream is always the same. In it, the woman known as Rogue seeks what her mutant power to absorb the abilities and memories of others forever denies her. Simple human touch. We've got the motif of the bird feathers there as well, which is intriguing. Let's get into this story. So this is a dream. So we've got fragmented panels here and some interesting transitions. Rogue touching Gambit's chest. That's the underside of his chin. Her hand goes over these cards, playing cards, aces, and also an 8 there. I don't know what that hand might mean in poker. Anybody want to let me know? Do so in the comments section. We get this interesting top-down view of her sitting in Gambit's lap, and we've got a window open and the air is blowing in, and there are birds flying above as well. So as we have this bird's eye view, and it looks like Gambit is sitting on a throne. And is that the club's sign there on the upholstery of the throne maybe? And then we get a close-up there coming on his face and his glowing red eye. And in the narrative captions, we're told the sensation of her fingers lightly caressing the skin of one of her X-Men teammates, wrapping her in a loving embrace she knew for far too long a time, tracing the familiar lines of his rough-hewn face, circling his eyes, red with the desire that burns through her dream like wildfire. The dream is always the same, as is its result. The dreamer is always woken. So, an interesting opening. Rogue was daydreaming. She's in a doctor's waiting room, and we'll discover which particular doctor's waiting room she's in after these next couple of pages. So the scene shifts to Braga Medical Center, Anchorage, Alaska, and there's a medical examination going on for Jean Grey. And this is in the aftermath of what happened to her in the previous issue. where she was the subject of a psychic attack. Now we know from issues of Adjectiveless X-Men that that was down to the Shadow King, and she's undergoing a physical examination here with a character formerly of Alpha Flight, that is Dr. Michael Two Young Men. He's no longer an active member of Alpha Flight, and of course at this time Stephen T. Seagle was writing the Alpha Flight solos, or the Alpha Flight comic book, volume 2 of Alpha Flight. And so there's a little kind of crossover going on here where he was going to have a mission in upcoming issues of Alpha Flight. But back to Scott and Jean. Why is Jean crying here? Because there's nothing physically wrong with her after the psionic attack, but it's her mind, Scott. My mental powers, they're completely gone. I can't sense anything, not even you. So, then, pardon me, then what happens is we go back to New York and the AI Institute. So this particular guy here eating these little sweets, which is an interesting piece of acting in the art from Bachalo for the character. He claims to have built a machine that can remove a mutant's abilities at the genetic level. So in effect, render them inert, neutral, or from a certain perspective, cure them of their mutant powers if they regard those mutant powers as a curse, which is exactly how Rogue regards them. Now, the government are interested in this. Government money is being pumped into this project, and somebody that's present keeping an eye on things is Henry Peter Gyrick, and also there's a senator there with his wife as well, and they're there to observe the subject of the machine, who of course it turns out is Rogue. So let's turn the page here, and we continue with Bachalo's art. So they're observing through a one-way glass what's going on in the laboratory or in the room with the machine. It looks like kind of an MRI scanner that Rogue is going to go into. And inside there is a nurse assistant, and she says to Rogue, "It's not my place to question your decision, Miss Smith, but you look apprehensive," because Rogue is using a fake name. It's not too late to reconsider it if you're having second thoughts, you know. So Rogue says, "With all due respect, miss, I don't know. I don't think you could know what's going on in my head right now. I'm not even sure I do." So we get in the narrative captions a little recap of what's been going on for Rogue recently, the night that she spent with Gambit in Antarctica when her powers were dampened, and then the obsession she has with touching subsequently, including giving mouth-to-mouth to Joseph, and also to touching Wolverine when he was unconscious. She knows how good it felt to touch, and God help her, she wants more. She needs her secret dreams to become reality, and she's willing to risk her solitary existence to achieve them. And then we get a page here. This is a device of Bachalo's, a layout device that he sometimes goes to, the 9-panel grid, in particular when maybe the page requires him to draw talking heads. So this is what's going on here, but he's making it interesting for readers. And also what's intriguing is you're going to see here the contrast between Bachalo's more cartoony style and on the other page Ryan Benjamin's more Jim Lee influenced style. And it's particularly intriguing to look at the different ways that the artists render a character like Aji, who is Bachalo's design and looks quite cartoony with that huge nose, versus how Ryan Benjamin draws him in a more tending to naturalistic fashion. So the chat here is about, is Rogue going to go through with this? The senator's wife doesn't want to look at the procedure taking place. So the husband there says, "Be careful, Mallory's security is at a heightened level of readiness." And then we're back in the laboratory room. Rogue is getting ready to go into that machine there. And what happens is a twist. and it is the assisting nurse. Is something the matter, asks Aji, and she pulls out a machine gun and starts shooting at him. You better believe something's the matter, madman, she yells. So that is interesting. And now we're back into, well, we are into the Ryan Benjamin portion of the issue. So you can see here that his style, as I said before, is Jim Lee influenced. But it's a good few years since he joined the Jim Lee studio, Wildstorm Studios. So he's had about 6 years drawing experience by the time he comes to draw this particular issue. So he's developed as an artist. He's developing little details of style that are not the same as Jim Lee's. And we'll see that in the course of the coming pages. So what happens here is Rogue, of course, has the powers of Ms. Marvel from all the way back in Avengers Annual number 10, which gives her strength, the powers of strength, flight, invulnerability. So she's able to jump in front of Dr. Aji and save him from those bullets, which simply bounce off of her. And then outside observing, we've got the Senator, Senator Brickman and Henry Peter Gyrick. And the Senator asks, I thought you ran a background check on Aji and his nurse Gyrick. How did this woman get through security? Gyrick says, she came up spotless. Someone must have gotten to her. But there's a twist coming, even though you can see what it is here on this side of the page. But because this is a double page spread, we got to go from here to here. So Rogue is going after the woman with the machine gun. She shoots at her, and it turns out that it is Mystique, her foster mother. So Mystique says to Rogue, come with me or perish. And let's continue. Well, there's a scene shift back to Anchorage. That's an interesting drawing there, close up on Jean Grey's face as she looks in distress. Interesting spotting of blacks as well. And interesting work too on the hair as well. So she is upset at the loss of her telepathy. And Scott is trying to comfort her. He says the bond between us transcends your mutant powers, Jean. You're my wife. Even if you've left my mind, you could never leave my heart. And her response is, his words have always been enough for her before, but today's the first time she's had to hear them only with her ears. Now that's false, because don't forget that Jean Grey, when she came back from the cocoon in Jamaica Bay that the Phoenix Force put her in, around or between issues 100 and 101 of Uncanny X-Men, and where she was discovered by the Fantastic Four in issue 286 of Fantastic Four by John Byrne. That Jean Grey that emerged from the cocoon did not have telepathic powers. She had her telekinesis, and that is how she operated when she was one of the members of X Factor with Cyclops. So this is poorly written narration by whoever it was, Joe Kelly or Stephen T. Seagle, and it's something that the editor Mark Powers should have been on and should have spotted. So then the scene shifts to Manhattan, the Upper West Side, and Rogue has followed Mystique to some kind of, it looks like penthouse balcony, and Mystique is drinking champagne, and she is angry with Rogue. I've spent months trying to infiltrate Aji's institute and shut it down, she says. I finally get invited as Mrs. Brickman, with the caveat of seeing his unholy technology in action, only to arrive and see that misguided fool who's fallen under his spell is you. So Rogue comes back at Mystique. Don't call me a fool, she says. You and me got different ways of looking at the world's all. You always wanted me to be a villain like you, but I ain't you, and I won't never be you. And Mystique responds, you're lucky I was able to shapeshift into the form of that nurse and save you at all. And Rogue responds, are you listening? I didn't want to be saved. I wanted that treatment. Mystique comes back and says, I don't believe that. We may have drifted apart from one another since I began associating with X Factor, but you were always like a daughter to me. How could my own child have come to be so filled with self-hatred as to try and change what she is? So Rogue says she's an adult, she can make her own decisions. I don't hate what I am, she insists. I hate what's being kept from me. And this is good from, and I think this is Seagle, I want these hands to be able to hold a lover in them without the fear that I'll consume him. And what about holding a child in my arms someday? How can either of those things happen long as I'm some freak of nature? And that would remind us that she was able to have a child with Magneto in the Age of Apocalypse reality. Here, Mystique responds over her shoulder, they can't. But would you betray your race for something as fleeting, as ultimately meaningless as love, whether it be from a man or a child? You disgust me. So this is interesting coming from Mystique, given her relationship with Irene Adler, aka Destiny, who's dead at this point. And of course Rogue would know something about that bond between the pair. And while you may not believe you need saving, it shows how little you know about Dr. Agi. He didn't develop his mutant gene technology in some vacuum. He was given technology created by Forge and told to reverse engineer it with one goal in mind. So this is a callback here, and there's supposed to be an editorial note. Whatever you want to say, Mark. So there was a space for Mark Powers to put in a little note, and that's the placeholder, and he never put the note in. And what he should have been referencing was issues 184 to 186 of Uncanny X-Men, when Forge developed a device and Henry Peter Gyrick was involved as well, and it was supposed to be used on Rogue to remove her powers. That's the deep reference there, but Mark Powers doesn't seem to know it. And it is it's the opportunity to make that reference is lost, except to a reader who's read those issues. So Mystique continues there. What is the goal in mind? The government's goal is the complete eradication of all mutants. Mutants like you, mutants like me. So Rogue is listening, but she asks, would that be so bad? There'd be no more fighting and no more hatred. So Mystique slaps her. If someone had invented a ray in the midst of the civil rights movement to turn black skin white, would you have championed its use as well? Rogue insists it's not the same thing. The analogy is a bad one. But Mystique says it is exactly the same thing. And then she delves into her bag of tricks to take on Gambit's form and imitate him. Don't let your desire for a normal life with your beloved Gambit blind you to the truth, Cher. So Rogue reacts violently to that, punches Mystique in the face, and Mystique asks her, why did you leave Gambit in Antarctica? I did it because I heard Remy's voice in my head telling me to. Now that's an interesting explanation of why she did what she did in Uncanny X-Men 350. And then Rogue is back to threatening Mystique to take off Gambit's form. And she says to her, I had a name before you started calling me Rogue, but I ain't had one since. So that's a reminder to readers that we don't know Rogue's real name at this point. But that's what you're all about, ain't it? Camouflage, disguised truths. There's only one way for me to know if what you're saying is true or not. So then she touches Mystique. For what purpose? To steal her memories? Or to check them out? Or take her power? Well, let's turn the page. So then the scene shifts to the Mutopia building near Central Park, and there's an argument between Henry Peter Gyrick and Dr. Agi, and it seems like Mrs. Brickman is at the receptionist desk, and she walks through security easily into the lift, because of course she's understood to be a senator's wife, but turn the page, she's not, of course. So Rogue absorbed Mystique's powers to take on the form of the senator's wife and gain access covertly to Mutopia. So she emerges from the lift, punches out the security team, and the lads realize that she's arrived. Get her, yells Gyrick, and put her in the machine. Agi, it's showtime. That's a good shot, a good upshot of Gyric's face. I think Ryan Benjamin has done well there. And you can see also how he's moving away ever so slightly from the Jim Lee style. There's a different physiognomy to Gyric's face there than you'd get from a straight Jim Lee clone. And now another double page spread of action. And you can see here that the perspective, the foreshortening on Rogue's left arm there is a bit wonky as she punches out a couple of security guys. And then there's a protocol Delta scenario, and that involves pulse cannons. So Rogue goes up and destroys those. And then Mystique arrives and kicks, or rather knocks Gyric in the back of the head with the butt of her rifle. So let's see what happens next. So there's more dialogue between Rogue and Mystique about whether Rogue is going to have the machine used on her or not. She says here, I spent the better part of my life making decisions based on other people's comments about me, sometimes behind my back, sometimes right up in my face, sometimes ringing out in my head like ghosts or something, but that ends now. I didn't come here to hurt you or to be hurt, she says to Dr. Aji. I came here for the truth. So what does he say to that? He says, I'm in favor of honesty and I'd be happy to tell you that this machine can save your life. So Rogue says, I'm sure you'd be happy to tell me anything to get me in that contraption and keep me from touching you. But that's what she's going to do. So she touches him and then she gets into his mind and memory and she sees the story of his experimentations, the failures to the point that he perfected the machine, the failure even on his sister, where there was a successful test, but only for mere seconds, and then her DNA started disbonding, genetic discorporation. So she's kind of held in stasis at the moment, but the machine works. He used all the data from the failures to perfect the machine. It works. So now Rogue has a choice, a real choice to make. Will she go into the machine or not? So there's more back and forth between Aji, Mystique, and Rogue. And Rogue says, shut up, Mystique. I touched you. I know how you think, and it ain't sane. I'll decide what's to be done here. And I'll do it with no one's voice in my ear but my own. So she's there looking at the machine. She says to Aji, she grabs him by the shirt, I want you to take away my powers. He's delighted. He thinks great. And we've got Mystique kind of blurred out here in the foreground. But then Rogue starts crying and she says, I want you to, but I can't let you do it. Not so long as I'd have to live every normal day of my life knowing this machine might be out there changing others' lives against their will. And we both know that's what it had come to. So Rogue goes and destroys the machine. And she says, when there's a confusion here, Dr. Aji should be in this panel, and he's begging, it doesn't have to be this way. And Rogue responds, it's not a question of being or not, Doc. It's just how it is. Dreams die sometimes. Might seem like the end of the world, but it's really just the start of a whole nother one. Let's turn the page, and the scene shifts to Ptarmigan Creek, Alaska. And Scott is there looking out the window pensively. And there's a change of plans here. They were all going to go back to New York, back to the X Mansion. Scott had an idea to restart Professor X's dream with the original founding X-Men members. And that also was Steven Seagal's intention, but the editors have gotten in the way. And so now Scott and Jean have to stay in Alaska. They're going to stay. And Jean here is saying, we have to stay here now while I recover. I know you had big plans for the X-Men, a new dream to shape and guide them in the Professor's absence. And Scott replies, I haven't. I have a lot of dreams, Jean. And if you could read my thoughts right now, you'd know that having you safe and sound beside me is always the one more foremost in my mind. I'm happy to stay in Alaska for as long as it takes, longer even. I love you, he says. And she says, I always knew that before, but now that I don't say it often. And there we go. So they're going to be left in Alaska, even though the whole plan was to bring them to New York. So it reads very strangely, doesn't it? And then the final page, Chris Bachalo is back for the final page, page 23. That's a really nice shot of the back of Wolverine's motorbike. Looks like he's doing some work on it with the tire there. There's a Massachusetts registration on it too. And Rogue arrives from New York City. So he asks her, "What's up, Rogue? Your cure work?" So he knew about her going to the AI Institute, and she says, "No, I couldn't go through with it." Now, the fact that she's flying and he asks her that is interesting, because does it mean that if she had gone into Aji's machine, what would have been removed from her would simply have been her mutant power, the one whereby if she makes skin-to-skin contact with somebody, she absorbs their mind and memories and any powers if they have them, but that the powers that she absorbed from Carol Danvers, Ms. Marvel, that she would retain those, flight, strength, and invulnerability, because something that was established during Chris Claremont's run was that the absorption of Ms. Marvel's powers, because Ms. Marvel got her powers from the alien Kree, that there was a permanent change to Rogue's DNA, nothing to do with her mutation, something different. So would she have retained the powers? Anyway, just an open question there. So Wolverine's here working on the tire. Again, this is always very good from Bachalo. He has the characters doing things to make it more interesting than just talking heads. So he replies to her when she asks him, "When you say anything, try to stop me, tell me it was wrong." Figured that was a lesson you had to learn by yourself. So very different from Mystique, who argued with Rogue and tried to force her hand in terms of not getting into the machine. And Wolverine had a different attitude, that she'd learned for herself what the right thing to do was. And so she asks, am I still welcome here after all I've done, including touching him when he was unconscious? And he says, "You tell me." So then she puts her head on his shoulder, but puts the blanket on the shoulder first so that she doesn't touch him. It's all very interesting and really carefully and well thought out and well drawn by Bachalo. "Welcome home, Rogue. Thanks," she says. And the camera pulls back and out, so we're looking at them sitting on the steps up to the door of the X-Mansion. And the dream is always the same. So, speaking of the original dreamer, when it comes to the X-Men, Professor X, he's in shadow there, looking menacing. Next, the all-new, all-deadly X-Men. Okay, so there's something new coming in the next issue. It's a double-sized issue. It is drawn by Bachalo. That's why Ryan Benjamin did fill-in work on this issue, so that Bachalo could get the 36 pages of story and art of the extra-sized issue 360 done. And the new team, this is editorial driven. It's not coming from Steven Seagle, and he's getting annoyed, as is Joe Kelly. Their original plans are suffering from editorial interference at this point. So one kind of half page of letters there concerning Uncanny X-Men 355, a preview of a double page spread from the next issue there. So you can see Bachalo's art there, and it looks like it's inked by Tim Townsend. Pretty cool stuff. And there you go. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary of Uncanny X-Men number 359. Seagle had a plan, a story idea to explore what it would mean for Rogue in terms of character and psychology, were she to consider having her mutant power removed. But from reports, it seems that editorial required him to wrap up that story much more quickly than he intended, and so it's wrapped up in this issue. And yeah, this is the kind of interference that had Seagle become uncomfortable with his role as writer, and which would ultimately lead to him leaving the book shortly. Well, I do hope that you enjoyed my review and commentary. If you did, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.